Hey! So this is going to be a big doctrinal video for me, almost looking forward to making this speech. I have learned something about tutorials that is important, and most people don't actually know. And I've got some clips where I gave this to a guy in a call, Peter, and most people don't know this, and this is, I'll say it now just to avoid this being some sort of watch until the end clickbait. But basically, it's about having tutorials in video games. So most video games are somewhat artificial and you've got to learn the rules, and most game designers know that as you start up, it's tough to teach your player all the basics in an organized way, in a kind of painless way, so they can feel like they're just playing the game while at the same time being taught a ton of stuff. It is maybe the most difficult part of game design, is just that first hour, you might say, showing the player how to do stuff. So the traditional solution, and I've just been playing Deus Ex where they do this, you start the game and you're presented with a question that says, "Hello, would you like a tutorial?" And then the player is supposed to think, well, I've never played this game before, I suppose I would like a tutorial. And this might seem like a pretty much perfect solution. This is absolutely the conventional wisdom I heard when I worked for games companies. All of it. Everybody will tell you, you have to have a tutorial to teach the player how to play the game, but because not everyone's going to want it, you also have to make it optional. So you see this once in a while when people are trying to teach you the game, they say, would you like a tutorial? And the fact that even Deus Ex does this, you know, they're very forward-thinking in a lot of ways. Even Deus Ex, I guess, does not know what I'm about to show you. So, what's the problem with this? And I'm not saying this is a disaster of a principle. I mean, you can do this. I myself have done it in Super Space Slayer 1. I didn't do it in Super Space Slayer 2 when I'd figured this out. And it's something you can do, but it's just got its weaknesses, basically. There is a better way. So, another funny thing I found with this principle is that even people who support it, even people who think, oh, well, yeah, I've got to have a tutorial, but I've got to make it optional, even they will normally admit immediately afterwards that most players won't pick the tutorial. When they're given the option, even players who need the tutorial are still going to turn it down. So they kind of know this weakness, but they don't see any way around it. So it's not very ideal. I've even had this in a call.
You can have a list of linear lessons. It's a pretty common thing in games to have some sort of tutorial. It's also sort of a meme that 90% of people will skip it.
I was thrilled to hear Peter say this in a call, because I knew I had the solution for him. And it's tempting in this kind of situation to think, well, if the players turned down the tutorial and they need the tutorial, it must be their fault, right? But I could make a whole separate video about that. I'm planning to. I don't think you really get to blame the players. Like, if you've got a situation where you know, maybe even the majority of players are going to pick an option you don't want, and you're just kind of looking forward to blaming them for choosing the wrong thing, you are planning to fail. And you can use my solution instead, which I swear I will get to. Anyway, so what's my actual solution? Well, the first problem here, I think, is that normally this tutorial message asks you if you would like a tutorial. You've really got to be careful of the phrasing here. Deus Ex asks you if you would like to do this now. Would you like a tutorial? And the trouble is, the answer really is, nobody would like a tutorial, right? They might think it would be useful in the long run, but you're kind of trying to play a video game. What you would like is the game to be well designed enough to be just playable intuitively from the get-go. So if you go in and you ask the player, would you like a tutorial, you're kind of asking the wrong question. And the real question you want to ask is, do you need a tutorial? But then the trouble is, the player doesn't know that. If you ask the right question, you realise the player doesn't know if they need a tutorial. They haven't played the game before. And they might have some sense of it, they might have played something similar. Most of the time, you're asking the player what they need at the very time where they know the least about the game. And I think once you phrase this question properly, so much depends on asking the right questions. And once you ask the right question, you realise, I'm kind of questioning the wrong guy. I'm asking the player what they want and what they need at the time when they know the least about what they want, and really, as the game designer who made this game, I should be dictating to them what they need, and that's where we get to my solution. Once I understood this, I changed the design in Super Space Slayer 2. I think I even got rid of the traditionally designed tutorial I made, and put a lot of work into a different kind. So Peter actually mentioned a linear sequence of lessons.
List of linear lessons. List of linear lessons. lessons.
So what I did was, I measured myself what I thought the player needed. So Super Space Slayer 2 has a few features. You shoot stuff, you move around, and you use your shield deflector thingy to deflect projectiles. And that's pretty much the three things you'll be doing for the whole game. So I needed the first 30 seconds to teach those things. And what I did was, I measured everything very carefully. I measured whether the player had shot their guns, whether they'd killed stuff with their guns. I actually have 2 gun prompts in there now. Whether they'd managed to collect something, whether they'd moved. And then I had these as and when prompts appear. If they were needed, the player would be shown how to do stuff and forced to do the thing. And if they weren't needed, if the player just kind of picked up the game and played it, those prompts would never appear, the game would never be paused, they wouldn't even know this stuff existed. So it is possible to completely bypass the tutorial in Super Space Slayer 2, not by just saying, no thank you, I don't want a tutorial, but by demonstrating, without even knowing it, that you don't need the tutorial. So I'm hoping the occasional person would go into the game, kind of pick it up instinctively, and then just think, oh, this game's growing, and they never know there's a tutorial. But for those who do need it, which is probably most people, there is a safety net there where you're given the prompts one after another to tell you what to do and show you the basics. And that's my solution, essentially. The traditional wisdom is to have this linear series of gauntlets, whereas what I'm talking about is multiple non-linear as and when prompts that appear. And also the traditional wisdom is to ask the player what they need and kind of put the responsibility on them. Whereas I'm saying that as a game developer, you should be watching the player's behavior, watching their output, and figuring out what they do and don't know from their behavior, because that's what you can measure. And I dare say that would work for most things. I'm sure there's going to be examples of types of game that doesn't work for, but this does seem to be a pretty flexible approach, and it deals with that unease that people like Peter have when they talk about the traditional wisdom.
90% of people will skip it.
So there you go. I guess you could say that my little game is better than Deus Ex in one respect. I'm sorry, I love you, Deus Ex. I hope this made sense. I wish these ideas are more well known, because everybody I've ever spoken to has always given the conventional wisdom of you have to have a tutorial and it has to be optional. And I really think I've discovered something here with this kind of as and when prompt thing that I wish more people at least knew, and they could at least consider it as they consider their options. So next time you've got a game where you've got to teach the player stuff, which is pretty much all of them, at least consider this option of my unconventional wisdom. Most indie game devs never finish their game. Why? No structure, no accountability, and no support. That's why I'm opening 5 private coaching spots to help devs get unstuck and finally finish their game. Message me game plan in my Discord and let's chat.